Many years ago in England, a circus elephant named Bozo, odd name for an elephant, was very popular with the people. All ages enjoyed watching this elephant perform, but all of a sudden one day there was a sudden change in the personality and the behavior and the predisposition of this elephant. He began attacking his trainers, and the manager of the circus decided he needed to get rid of the elephant. Now, a nearby man who had heard about the troubles with the elephant begged the manager, "Give me 2 minutes in the cage alone with him." The manager said, No, I can't do that. You'll be killed." "I don't think so," said the man. I just think I've got an idea here. Do I have your permission?" "All right," he said, "but first you'll have to sign a release absolving the circus of all responsibility." The man signed the paper. The door to the cage was unlocked, and the man stepped inside. He stood quite still at first, and then a faint smile began to form on his face as he began to softly speak to the animal. He seemed to be speaking some sort of foreign language. Slowly, as the man continued to talk, the elephant raised his head and eventually began to sway his giant elephant head from side to side and became very docile. Eventually, the elephant took his trunk and wrapped it around the man's waist, and the two of them walked very gently around the ring. After a while, the man bade farewell to the elephant, and he left the cage. "He'll be all right now," he told the manager. "You see, he's an Indian elephant, and none of you spoke his language, Hindustani. I would advise you to get someone around here who can speak Hindustani. He was just homesick." And with that, the little man put on his coat and his hat and he left. The astounded manager looked down at the piece of paper. The name on the paper was Rudyard Kipling. I think that feeling of being homesick is something every one of us have felt at some point in time. The desire to be around someone who speaks our language, to be with people that get us. It's the root of longing for home. Now, we're going to take a few minutes today and look at another story of someone who is away from home and is feeling more than a little bit homesick. This is a story that's found in the Bible in Luke chapter 15. It goes like this. A man had 2 sons. When the younger told his father, "I want to share in your estate now instead of waiting until you die," his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all of his belongings and took a trip to a distant land, and there he wasted all of his money on parties and prostitutes. About the time his money was gone, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him to feed his pigs. The boy became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the swine looked good to him, and no one gave him anything. So when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired men have food enough and to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father, and I'll say, 'Father, I've sinned against you, against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired man.'" So he returned home to his father. Now let's pause the story here for a minute. You may recognize this story as that of the lost son, or it has become more commonly known as the prodigal son. The word prodigal describes someone who is recklessly spending money, or as I like to say, teenager. Now let's listen to that last line again. He returned home to his father. What is it about going home? What is it deep down inside of each one of us that longs for that place that we call home? Is it the feeling of safety, security, love? Is it the hope that we'll be welcomed, forgiven, taken care of despite our stupid choices? Do we go home because we have unfinished business? Do we make that journey out of habit or out of obligation, out of necessity or out of love? I remember a long time ago falling off from a swing set when I was about 5 years old, face planted in the dirt. I stood up and my nose was bleeding all over myself, and my friends were trying to help me and comfort me, and I just couldn't get away from them fast enough. I couldn't get home fast enough. As I ran the entire distance of 2 houses in a tiny city block, I chanted over and over, "I want my mom, I need to be home. I want my mom, I need to be home." That was a going home journey filled with desperate need. Maya Angelou has written, "The ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned." Now let's go back to our story of the prodigal son, and in a nutshell, I'll summarize what happens. The younger son decides to go home to his father, and when he appears on the horizon, his father runs to him, and he makes a big scene. The father hugs his son, he's crying, he's yelling for the servants to bring robes to put on him and put expensive rings on his fingers. He calls for a huge feast and a celebration in honor of the return of his long-lost son. In the meantime, the older son, who hadn't wasted any money, who was still home with Dad, was out in the field working hard. And when he heard the music playing off in the distance, he got angry and he got jealous, and he refused to even go inside to the party at all. He complained to his dad that he was the one working hard. He hadn't wasted any money, but his dad had never thrown him that kind of a party, had never given him those kinds of robes or rings. It wasn't fair. His brother blew all that money and he still got rewarded. But the father explained with these words to the son. "Look, dear son, you and I are very close, and everything I have is yours. But it is right to celebrate, for he is your brother, and he was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, and he's found." Now, that's a nice story. It's filled with a lot of opportunity for discussion, for debate, for appreciation, and confusion. I have to admit that the first time I heard this story in Sunday school, I thought it was the stupidest thing I ever heard. I immediately took the older brother's perspective, and I grew angry with the father who would take his older son for granted and then throw a big party and celebrate the return of his idiot younger son and treat him like he was some kind of king. I wouldn't have gone into that party either. And then I became a parent. I have experienced those terrifying moments of having misplaced my children. One who was asleep on the floor of the closet while everyone in the neighborhood was searching for him. The other who was playing in a brand new place at the neighbor's house. There is nothing like the terror of losing your child and then the joy of finding them again. When my oldest son moved out on his own and then came back for a visit the first time, I completely understood the dad scene with the feast and the robes and the rings and the party. I get that the money lost didn't matter as much as the son being found safe. Also, I think if we're honest, we've all had prodigal son moments in our lives. Times when we've lost our way. Times when we have been stupid with our money or with our associations or with our skills or with our time. We've all needed to get home, to get squared away and remember who we are. We have all hoped that we could just somehow be forgiven, that we could just start all over, and that somehow magically things would go back to the way they used to be. Well, currently we're in the middle of that time of year when our minds do turn toward home. We want to go home for the holidays. We long for the place and for the people. We want to recapture the feelings and the warmth. We rejoin distant and widespread members of the family. We chalk up the end of a college semester together. We marvel at taller children. We drag out dusty board games and decks of cards, and we cautiously dare to sit and talk. We sleep in awkward beds. We reminisce about childhood memories. More than any other time of the year, we gather members of our family together and we tell family stories. It's an important ritual. It's significant bonding time. Sadly, for many reasons, some of us don't have that physical home to return to. It's gone, or the people are gone, or it was never there to begin with. That's when the holiday season gets tough. That's when it gets lonely. That's when we need to find the spirit of home and embrace it. Author Cecilia Ahern once wrote, "Home isn't a place, it's a feeling." So perhaps we all need to strive a little bit harder to identify the feelings of home and wrap those feelings around us. How do we do that? Well, I think it's something that happens to us as we connect with people, as we connect with activities or hobbies or careers that feed us and center us and give us that feeling of being at home within ourselves. So now, after all this, I ask, what in the world does the story of the prodigal son have to do with us and our homes and this holiday season? Well, here's a kind of corny but radical idea. Perhaps when we get together this holiday season with our people, we could try something different. Let's take the time to see each person as a prodigal child returning home. Let's be excited to see them. Let's welcome them with hugs and smiles. No matter what happened, let's focus on their presence. And let's forgive past difficulties. I think it's quite possible on many levels that the next family member or the next visitor to your house was really once lost and is now found. That person is a prodigal child and needs a loving parent. You know, there are just a few emotional needs that we humans have. We each need to believe that our lives matter to someone. We each need to know that we have a place in the world. And we each need to know that we are worthy of forgiveness, worthy of attention, worthy of welcoming hugs and large feasts, worthy of celebration. If we are able to welcome our prodigal children home, we are helping them to have some of those emotional needs met. Are you willing to try that with me? I hope so.